these commanders don't actually have a whole lot of lore. Othari has only one little bit of lore, basically. They got hatched during an escape plan during the Phyrexian invasion, and then the Mirrans saw the Phoenix Othari and were like, hey, you're cool, and the Phoenix was like, yeah, I'm a newborn. I'm just gonna lend you my magical fire as a tool, and then you can forge stronger weapons to kill Phyrexians. That's my story. That's it. That's it. I don't have a full-on lore section for this one. I'm sorry. That said, today's commander is Othari, the Sun's Glory. I haven't made a Boros commander yet, so this was a personal challenge to myself to go ahead and make one. And besides, I've actually really liked this card since I used to play it in my Kessin deck, so I figured it'd be a good idea to go ahead and build it for the $15 challenge, which, as usual, remember, the commander gets to be $1 or less, and the deck itself must be a $15 within a few pennies of, you know, give or take, must be a $15 deck maximum. But Othari is a lovely, lovely Phoenix commander with a bonkers ability. Holy crap. 5 mana, it's got Flying, Lifelink, and Haste. Whenever it attacks, you get an experience counter, and then you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token that's tapped and attacking for every experience counter that you have. You can also tap a rebel you control to return Othari from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this card is a little bit nutty, a little bit insane. We're going to play it on, hopefully, turn 3 or 4 based on our ramping, and hit somebody for a quick 3 damage. It's got evasion, shouldn't be hard. We get a rebel at that point. From this point on, the game should go completely bonkers in our favor. And I'm going to go ahead and show you why that is. Let's go ahead and talk about our ramp section. This is how we're going to be getting our commander out as fast as possible, and you'll see what kind of nuttiness we have in store here. So, of course, we have Command Sphere, add a mana of any color, sack it to draw a card. Of course, we have Fire, Diamond, Fractured Power Stone, Marble Diamond, Mind Stone. They're all good 2-mana mana rocks. The Mind Stone allows us to get a card if we want to, if it dies or if we kill it. The Honored Heirloom lets us mess with people's graveyards. I freaking love this card. Just free graveyard interaction in a mana rock. Please, run it even in non-budget decks. I do. It's great. Then we have the Wayfarer's Bauble, sack it to get a basic land from your library into the battlefield tapped. Unstable Obelisk, which is a 3-mana mana rock that we can blow up late in the game to blow up any permanent. Not the strongest thing in the entire world, but in budget decks, we need as many modular cards as possible. Scampering Surveyor and Core Cartographer, both are 4-mana cards that get us lands out of the deck. Core Cartographer specifically gets us any type of planes out of the deck, so we are not just ramping, we get to get dual land cards using this, which is really, really important. Moving right along, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the deck, we have a very, very small, for my standards, removal and interaction section. Starting with the Braid, 3 damage to a thing, or we get to blow up an artifact, rip apart, blow up an artifact or enchantment, or 3 damage to a thing. Crib Swap, we get to exile a creature, and then get a, they get a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter when we do it. Collective Effort, we can use this to either destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, blow up an enchantment, or put a 1/1 counter on each creature target player controls. For every creature we tap, we can escalate this card, which will give it another one of these abilities. 9 times out of 10, we're just going to be tapping 2 rebels and activating this ability to give ourselves 1/1 counters on all of our stuff, blowing up an enchantment, and killing a creature. Then we have Angelic Purge, sack any of our rebels up, and then we get to get rid of an enchantment, or an artifact, creature, or enchantment. Yes. This is a super, super good budget card if you have not already grabbed one. And then, of course, one of my absolute favorites, Meteor Golem. Blow up any non-land permanent and opponent controls. We have some ramp. It's easy enough to do this. Once our commander's online, we aren't really casting too many spells. So, Meteor Golem, you've got the mana to cast them. It'll be okay. Generous Gift is a very, very easy card to slot in any deck if you've got it. Blow up any permanent on the board. That includes a land. So, you know, Glacial Chasm gets to go bye-bye. Mace's End gets to go bye-bye. And then the creature, they get an elephant creature token when we cast this card, blowing up a card. So, super, super powerful. Very, very good card. You should run it in almost every deck that you possibly can. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of the deck. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of the deck. So, remember that our commander says we gain an experience counter when it swings. That means that no matter what happens, our commander is always getting us closer and closer to that end game state. So how are we going to be getting more experience counters? Well, we don't always have to rely on attacking. Sometimes we can rely on proliferating. because it is a counter that we have. Our opponents just don't get a chance to interact with it. The Grateful Apparition, if it deals damage to a player or planeswalker, we proliferate. 9 times out of 10, that just means we're going to be getting another experience counter, getting more creatures available to us. Then we have Unbound Potential. We can proliferate for 2 mana, or we can pay 6 mana and proliferate and put a 1/1 counter on up to 2 creatures. Just use this to proliferate. Just use this to make more rebels. Don't worry about that entwine cost. Not super important. And then we have the Volt Charge. Deal 3 damage to any target. So this is another kill card in our deck, but it's also got Proliferate. So we're hitting something with a Lightning Bolt, probably a commander, and then getting another experience counter. And then the Wanderer Strike, another removal card in our deck that allows us to proliferate after we play it. This is why our removal section was as sparse as it was. We actually have some removal stapled onto other cards here. But yeah, exile any creature and then proliferate, giving us another experience counter. But that's not the only way we're going to be increasing our experience counters. Remember that our commander gives us an experience counter every time he swings. So what if we go ahead and throw in some extra combats? A lot of extra combats. Response Resurgence, this can blow up an attacking or blocking creature, or it can be used to give all of our creatures vigilance until end of turn, and then we get an additional combat phase after our main phase. Note, the only bit of counter synergy this has with our deck is it will not untap our rebels who have already swung, because it is a sorcery card. We don't get to use this after our commander swings. We use this before, so we're getting 2 sets of rebels swinging, not a giant army of rebels swinging multiple times. But it is giving us extra experience counters, and it's yet another instance of a removal spell stapled onto one of our extra cards. The Hexprate Wallbreaker, this says that every time a creature attacks that's equipped with it, if it's the first combat phase, untap each attacking creature, and then there's additional combat phase afterwards. Note, it makes a token when it comes out. Don't worry about stapling this to your commander. Just cast it, swing with the commander, and get your extra combat phases if you don't have the mana to attach it to your commander, because it's just going to give that token that ability until it dies as well. Then we have Hellkite Charger. If it attacks, we can pay 7, and then if we do, we can untap all of our attacking creatures, and after this combat, there's an additional combat phase. Remember that with our commander, because we are trying to just get it out and swing it repeatedly, we shouldn't be casting a ton of extra spells while it's out, because it is doing everything our deck wants to be doing on its own. It's giving us life, it's dealing damage, it's generating tokens. All we have to do is make sure that the way is clear to swing with a theory over and over again, and we are going to be peachy. Akai Battle Squad, whenever one or more modified creatures we control attack, we can go ahead and untap all creatures we control, and then there is an additional combat phase afterwards. A modified creature is something that has a 1/1 counter or an equipment or an aura, so the Hexplate Wallbreaker automatically gives us this ability. Or we have things like getting 1/1 counters, which you'll see later. We've already shown a couple cards that give 1/1 counters, like that Entwine card earlier. So we have a few ways already of making modified creatures, so the Aki Battle Squad is going to be happy. And then Scourge of the Throne. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, if the person that we attack had the most life or is tied for the most life, then we untap all of our creatures and create an additional combat phase. So if we are on the back foot, this is giving us extra combat phases. And then we have Eomir, the Marshal of Rohan. Haste, and whenever one or more of our attacking legendary creatures dies, we can untap all the creatures we have, and then there's an additional combat phase afterwards. This only triggers once per turn. So this card is just a backup if we are swinging our commander into somebody who does have a flying blocker. Eomir is going to sit on the board, and we get to look at them and go, hey, if you want to block our commander, then we're going to get another combat. We're not going to be able to do as much with that combat, but this is going to make people think twice about blocking our commander, even in situations where they can. So now, the other thing we got to talk about is those tokens. They are tiny. They are tutus. We should probably make them bigger. But before that, we also need to be able to get through our deck. We need to draw lots of cards. And remember that Eomir says that if our attacking legendary creatures dies, we get to use its effect. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the draw section of this deck. Starting with Relic Vial. Sack a creature, draw a card. That's the only relevant part on this ability. We can use this to force Eomir to function for us. Then we have Rob the Archives, Casualty 1. Exile 2 cards from the top of our library. We can play them this turn, sack one of our rebels, and we can go ahead and use its ability twice. And that lets us look at the top 4 cards of our library, play as many of them as we want. 2 mana to draw 4 cards? That's perfectly reasonable, even an impulse draw. Rumor Gatherer says if another creature enters the battlefield, we scry 1. If it's the second time, we draw a card instead. So whenever our commander swings, generally speaking, we are just going to be drawing a card. Mentor of the Meek, anytime a creature with power 2 or less ETBs, pay 1 to draw a card. Super easy to do in our deck. Heartwarming Redemption, discard all the cards in our hand, draw that many cards, gain life equal to the cards that we discarded. So a simple wheel effect we have access to. Cut a Deal makes everybody draw a card except you, and then you draw a card for every opponent who drew this way. So 3 mana, draw 3, you're giving people cards. Not the worst thing to do in the entire world if you are the one benefiting most from it. Then we have Carnage Altar. Sack a creature, draw a card. 9 times out of 10 we're sacking rebels. Sometimes we're sacking legendary creatures to make sure that we get the extra combats. But, you know, most of the time, this is just a draw engine with our rebels. Then we have Phyrexian Vault. 2 mana, tap it, sack a creature, draw a card. Most of the time, we're sacking rebels. And then we have the Welcoming Vampire. Whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, draw a card once per turn. So super easy for us to activate in this deck. However, be careful if you are setting up a board with things like Welcoming Vampire and Mentor of the Meek. The next section that we are going to be talking about, it's a little important that you do not have these cards on the board at the same time, because the next section is a very deep 13-card Lords and Anthem section. Starting with Adriana. All of our creatures get melee. If we are attacking multiple people, which is easy to do in a tokens deck, we give all of our creatures 1/1 until end of turn. So most of the time, a Theory swings at player 1, a Rebel swings at player 2, and another Rebel swings at player 3. Now, all of our Rebels gain +3/+3. The Commander's Insignia, for every time we have cast our commander from the command zone, which, with how important our commander is, we'll probably do that a few times. All of our creatures get 1/1. The Gold Light Commander, whenever a creature ETBs, all of our creatures gain 1/1 until end of turn. This could just win us the game on its own. Let's say you've got 4 or 5 experience counters on, just ready to go. You swing with O Theory, you're summoning 5 rebels. That means Rebel 1 is getting 1/1. Rebel 2 is getting +2/+2. Rebel 3 is giving +3/+3. Rebel 4 is getting 4/4. And Rebel 5 is getting 5/5 distributed. So the last Rebel that comes out will have just one of these 1/1 additions onto it, and then the other Rebels will have a staircasing effect of +1/+1s. And if you get extra combats, then your Rebels are going to be swinging for like 12, 13, 14 damage, staircasing down and up. So just lots of math with this card. I hope you're okay with that. Inspiring Leader, our commanders have creature tokens get +2/+2, which means all our tokens will be 4/4s as a baseline. Intangible Virtue, all of our tokens get 1/1 and Vigilance. This is a way that we can circumvent the extra combats problem I talked about with Response Resurgence. This will allow us to have tokens that just have Vigilance and can do their thing even when they are being spawned in with our commander. Then we have Nilai, Sun's Vanguard. All of our tokens have Double Strike. And whenever one of our tokens attacks a player, exile the top card of your library. During the turn you attack with a token, you can play that card. So we have another draw spell in the deck, and it's doing a lot of work for us. Also, it's a Lord we get to run that doesn't have counter synergy with things like Welcoming Vampire, which is still super sweet for us. Then we have Paladin class. Spells your opponent's control cost 1 more to cast. Not super important. That only works on their turn, or our turn rather. But if we level it up, all our creatures get 1/1, and if we level it up again whenever we attack, target attacking creature gets 1/1, and other attacking creatures, whenever you attack until the end of turn, target attacking creature gets 1/1 for every other attacking creature, and then it gains Double Strike. So our commander swings, spawns a shit ton of things, and we have all these tokens laid over from previous turns. Our commander gets 1/1 and Double Strike from those. Generally speaking, with Paladin class leveled up fully, our commander will just commander damage somebody out of the game. So just watch out for that. Super important. Timing might be a little wonky on it sometimes, but we're going to make our Phoenix hit huge. Then we have Phantom General. All our tokens get 1/1. Shared Animosity. All our tokens get 1/0 for every other attacking creature that shares a type with it. So all the Rebels are powering up all the other Rebels. This card is nutty. If you have a field with 10 rebels, then every single rebel has +10/+0. Rally the Ranks gives all of our creatures 1/1. Radiant Destiny, we choose a creature type, and all of them get 1/1 and Vigilance. If we have the City's Blessing, which is easy to do, it's Commander. But Radiant Destiny, we're just going to choose Rebels. Like, just choose Rebels. Prava of the Steel Legion, all of our attacking creature tokens get 1/4. It can also spawn tokens as well if we need to. It's a backup to our Commander in a huge pinch. And then we have the Valor of Arcros. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, creatures you control get 1/1 until end of turn. So this is another copy of the Gold Light Commander for our deck, basically. Valor of Arcros is making all of our tokens do tons and tons of stuff. Now, we have a bit of a modular section to talk about. So we have our draw, we have our ramp, we have our way we're going to win by powering up our tokens. But these cards in the deck actually do multiple things, so we need to talk about each of them. Let's start with Trader Post. We can use it to discard a card and gain 4 life. We can use it to pay a life and make a goat token. We can sack a creature to take an artifact from our graveyard and put it into our hand, or we can sack an artifact to draw a card. This is a backup for our Commander. It is very likely with the experience counter way that our Commander works that people are going to try to keep it off the board, nuke it repeatedly. Trading Post will allow us to just break our mana rocks and immediately get our Commander back repeatedly. They're going to have to kill the Trading Post as well. Then we have Nahiri the Harbinger. We can use it to discard a card and draw a card, so it's a little bit of draw power for our deck. We can also use it to exile an enchantment, tapped artifact, or a tapped creature, so it's able to get rid of problematic cards on the board as well. This is another instance of removal in the deck being stapled onto cards that have otherwise useful abilities, like a looting effect on Nahiri. Her ult will probably never activate. Most Planeswalker ults usually don't activate, but we can search our library for an artifact creature and immediately put it onto the battlefield and give it haste, and then bounce it to our hand at the beginning of the end step. Not the most important effect because we're just not going to be using it that often. But if you get lucky, let me know. And then we have Lorehold Command. We choose 2. Make a 3/1 red and white spirit creature. All of our creatures get 1/0 and gain indestructible and haste until end of turn, or deal 3 damage to a target and then gain 3 life, or sack a permanent and draw 2 cards. So we can use this to trigger that multi-combat thing from before. Also, this is another instance of removal being stapled onto a card that is otherwise being used to give all of our tokens indestructible. Lots of things this card is doing, and they are all things that our deck wants to do. But we actually have something else very important to talk about. Token synergy. Now, I've made a fuss about making sure that decks have lieutenants so that if your commander dies, you have access to something else. So let's talk about Anim Pakal, the 1000th Moon. Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, put a 1/1 counter on her, and then create X11 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Anim Pakal. So every time she swings with another creature, then she is just getting 1/1 and then making more gnomes, and every time she swings, she's making more gnomes. She is a weaker version of our Othiri Commander. She is throwing hands repeatedly with her effect. And remember, she spawns tokens based on her 1/1 counters, not her power, so she's not going to be generating them based on the anthems that we've shown earlier. However, with Rosie Cotton of South Lane, anytime you create a token, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control that's not Rosie. So we spawn a token, we put a 1/1 counter on an Impakal, and then we go on with our lives, like spawning more gnomes. So just Rosie Cotton does work in this deck. The food token's okay. It's an artifact we can sacrifice to Trading Post later. But most importantly, because we are making a lot of tokens, we get to... Here's the idea. Rosie Cotton is on the board, and we swing with our lovely, lovely commander, Othari. Othari has 1, 2, 3, 4 experience counters. Let's just say 3. You've swung with it a few times. That's reasonable enough. Rosie says, oh, you spawned 3 tokens. I guess your commander needs 3 1/1 counters. I guess you get to get 6 life. I guess you get to get somebody that much closer to dying to commander damage. Like, She doesn't say when you make one or more tokens. It's every time you create a token. She is generating us lots of value. But speaking of generating stuff for the tokens, we also have Witty Roastmaster and we have Impact Tremors. Both of these cards say that if a creature ETBs, we can make all of our opponents take 1 damage. So even if our Rebel tokens don't make it in to hit people's life, they are still doing tons of damage to our opponents because of these ETB effects. Super, super powerful in a deck like this. Remember, our removal section also had Warstorm Surge. All of our tokens enter the battlefield dealing 2 damage to people or any target that they have. Lots and lots of damage gets to come to people this way. But we're not done. We also have to talk about reanimation. We are a Phoenix deck after all. It would be kind of weird not to have reanimation, and having reanimation also means we can recast our commander later with a couple of these cards if its command tax gets to be a bit too high. But let's begin with my boy Sun Titan. Now these 2 cards are the same card. Redemption Choir and Sun Titan, they're the same card. I do not care what anybody says. There's no difference between these cards. In most decks, Redemption Choir is going to get its ability no matter what, so Sun Titan says ETB or attack, return a permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Redemption Choir says ETB or attack, return a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your battlefield from your graveyard to the battlefield. They're the same card to me, just 1 cost less and is a little more clunky. But otherwise, they are the same thing. Also, with extra combats, they are getting us lots of cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield. Super, super easy, super, super quick. But these will not get our commander back. Some of the cards that can get our commander back, though, are cards like Marshal's Anthem. It's another one that says all our creatures get 1/1. It's another Anthem, but it has multi-kicker. For every single time we pay into the kicker cost of 2, we can return up to X creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of times it's been kicked. This is stupidly powerful with our commander, because if it dies, we just play Marshal's Anthem, get it out of the graveyard, and it's got haste, and now it's powering up all of our tokens. It's just a beautiful Magic the Gathering card. Then we have Ascent from Avernus. It's kind of similar. Return all creatures and planeswalkers with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So if you pay 9 into this, this is getting our 8 into this, actually. This is going to get our commander onto the battlefield and basically every other thing in our graveyard that we care about. All the creatures that we have, all the planeswalkers we have, so all the creatures we have that are giving 1/1, all the creatures we have that are doing things like Witty Roastmaster and Rosie Cotton and Anim Pakal, all of those are coming out. My boy Meteor Golem will probably never come out with this card because you're not spending 10 mana on Ascent to Avernus. Unless you really want to play Meteor Golem. I mean, I'm not going to stop you from playing one of my favorite cards in Magic the Gathering. By all means, use Ascent from Avernus to summon Meteor Golem. Tell me your stories if it works out for you. And then we have a single board wipe we have access to. This is the Hour of Reckoning. It has Convoke, and it destroys all non-token creatures. It's not the most complicated thing to think about. We're just going to tap Rebels, blow up all the non-token creatures. We get to keep our Rebels, and our commander has haste, so we're just going to summon it again. Or, more likely, we're just going to tap some Rebels to summon it from the graveyard, because we do not always need to be paying extra command tax in a deck that simply doesn't care about it. So now we got to talk about lands. I know it's probably the most boring part of most decks, but 26 basics. We've got 10 mountains, 16 plains, 3 dual lands. Fury Calm Snarls a reveal land. Command Tower is a Omni land, and then Sacred Peaks does come into play tap, but importantly, it does say Mountains Plains, so Core Cartographer can grab it. And then we've got the Fetching Lands section, Naya Panorama, Myriad Landscape, Terramorphic Expanse, Shire Terrace, Promising Veins, Escape Tunnel, yay, well, there we go, Escape Tunnel, and Evolving Wilds. All of these cards give us the ability to fetch any type of land we need out of the deck onto the battlefield. Super, super easy, super, super simple. But that said, this was my first Boros deck I wanted to go ahead and work on, and I figured we would not do it as an equipment deck because that's boring. We weren't going to do Boros equipments. We decided to do Boros token spawning. So this was Othari, Sun's Glory. Remember, whenever it swings, we're going to be generating experience counters. Nobody gets to interact with those except us. We get to proliferate ourselves up. We get to get extra combats to get more tokens onto the battlefield. We get to even use our rebels to revive our commander in a pinch. We've got other reanimator cards to revive it as well if we need to. We've got tons of decent draw, tons of ways to make our tokens get bigger and bigger and bigger and close out the game for us. I hope you guys enjoy this deck when you play it. You're going to be spawning tons of things on the board, and you're going to be overwhelming your opponents with just a ton of value. And if you really want to boost the deck up, a lot of the cards from this deck are actually available in the pre-con that Athari came in, and nobody buys that pre-con because it's only got one card anybody cares about, Clever Concealment. So you actually could spend a little more money, buy the pre-con, and you'll have like 20% of the cards I listed in this deck. Then you spend like $10 for the cards I listed, and suddenly you've got just a super powerful deck with a Clever Concealment as well, which is sitting at like, what, $20 now? That thing's getting expensive for no reason. I mean, it's a Teferi's protection, so I guess there's good reason. But anyway, that's Athari Sun's Glory. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.